somewhere on this planet, I imagine we were on time. Although, wouldn't that be crazy if there was a place in the world where rather than it being like an hour, it was like an hour and a half? Or
what do you mean? Oh, you're losing me.
What time were we meant to be?
Oh yeah,
Like,
we're still first, Matty, longtime fan of the pod. Thanks for having me on.
yeah, no problem.
But
It's honestly, this is quite a big platform for you, so
yeah,
don't mess
the
this up, bud.
exposure is great.
Yep.
Yeah, we're still here at the Seattle Overload. We're still struggling with the whole daylight savings time thing. Trying to convert time zones across the Atlantic. There's a lot of math involved, a lot of maps and protractors, etc. So we'll figure it out. But where else in the world can you, like in most parts of the world, when it comes to timeliness, you'd say like, you're on time, but in Soviet Russia, time is on you.
Yes. What's that a can of? Is that no free ads, but that looks interesting.
LaCroix, or pardon me, LaCroix.
Unironically.
Yeah, it's not bad. I mean, there are better sparkling water brands out there, but it's not bad. It's got it has natural essence.
It's not like the boys
essence.
scenario where you're going to be part of some crazy cult.
Fresca. It's so funny that they chose Fresca for that.
It is, yeah.
That's hilarious, man. Yeah, we have a lot of chit chat.
Yeah, this is going to be a chit chat episode.
Yeah, we're going to chit chat.
We're
gonna
about
rant.
the Seahawks. So the preamblers are not going to be upset.
Yeah.
But anyway, I'm looking at a cup of tea I've made. It just looks disgraceful.
Why is it disgraceful?
It's just so milky looking. Because I was like, I don't want to keep everyone waiting longer and longer and longer. So what I'll do is I'll just put the milk in first and then pour the water. I've just got it wrong. But, these things happen. Like, is that a problem? Yes. Is it sort of going against my nationality? Yes. Will anyone find out? Well, yes, now, because I've told people. But ordinarily, I could cover this up. We could have a tea cover up here.
Now, what's your nighttime tea? What's your blend?
Brother, I wish I was that organized. I don't.
Do you just pick whatever?
I should say Earl Grey in the evenings, like Earl Grey.
Okay.
And then just English breakfast.
Doesn't Earl Grey have caffeine?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, right. Because normally you drink coffee.
No, yeah. There isn't like a there's not like a non-caffeine thing.
Okay, now when you're having a normal day where you're not consuming caffeine in the wee hours of the night, because for you it's like 2 a.m. over there.
Well, here's the thing. Like,
what kind of tea do you go for?
Well, I think a lot of English people don't care about the caffeine at night thing. Like when it comes to tea, because there's not much caffeine, is there?
You can have upwards of 120 milligrams. That's like half a cup of coffee.
Like old people, like shout out mom and dad. They just have tea before they go to bed, even though there's caffeine in it.
That's insane.
Okay.
I mean,
well, you just called my parents insane. So
no. I'm just saying, like culturally, you guys can do that. How do you not follow? I mean, I can, because I drink so much coffee. I'm like desensitized, so I can drink coffee. I don't do this, but I could drink coffee all the way up to 5 p.m. and go to bed at 9 p.m. and be fine. But like most people, you tell them that they think you're insane in America, and it's the pot calling the kettle black, no pun intended, to call anyone insane over here, because we all have our own, Americans being Americans. But when it comes to like, food habits, consumption habits. But anyway.
No.
How are you? What's up? What's going on?
I'm good. Let's see if anyone's been mean in our actual comments. No one's been mean. Lots of football talk there. Very disappointing. Okay. Hey, Isaiah. I chose the right time to do taxes, I guess. There's never a wrong time to do taxes, I'd suggest, Cameron. Right. Let's start.
Taxes are not optional, by the way. I found that out. Kidding. It was a joke. Mm-hmm. I like to joke.
That was a good, quite witty, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Sharp. It's Aries season. Whose birthday is up next? That's right, Wolfpack. Ooh, that was my wolf howl. My birthday, I think.
When's your birthday?
My birthday.
Yeah.
You get that? My.
When is your birthday, my fellow Aries?
Day. It is Jalen Carter's birthday. 4th of April. And someone else had the birthday on the 5th of April. Now, who was that? Who was that? Another draft prospect. Might have been Ojulari.
Interesting.
I mean, it's not that interesting. But,
you're right, it's not. Yeah. My birthday is much more interesting. Not to steal your thunder, but my birthday does come before April 4th.
It does?
Yeah.
I thought you were May.
No. Then I wouldn't be in Aries.
Oh, that's so messed up.
It is in the latter third of March.
When is it?
You'll have to find out.
Okay, right, yeah. I mean, date of birth online, probably not a good idea, right? Like, let's chill out now. Okay.
You could sleuth it, probably.
Yeah. I mean, that's messed up. I apologize. I mean, as an Aries, I had to make it about myself. So
that's growth that you.
It's not today, is it? Don't tell me it's today. That would really upset me.
It's not too well defined today.
How very interesting. Oh, cool. Well, that's easy. I'll just message you tomorrow and be like, happy birthday. Yeah. Perfect. And then if it's not tomorrow and I've misread the situation, I'll just message you the next day. And basically it can be your birthday every day for the Aries calendar, and it will be about you every day. Which is perfect. It's what you want anyway. It's the perfect present. Mm-hmm. Brilliant.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Let's start the podcast.
We're going to chit chat. Talk about some football.
Okay. Welcome to the Seattle Overload podcast, where the Seahawks have made a slightly puzzling decision at this point in the free agency process. And so it's time for Griffin and I to kind of dive into why the Seahawks cut defensive tackle Al Woods and what the Seahawks are actually doing with their defensive front seven and their defensive line, and whether the Seahawks are doomed for 2023 and beyond on defense. So, Griff, what's going on?
Like the Woods move, I think caught most people off guard because he was the one player that there was consensus on. Like there's very little consensus about all these players. He was the one guy that everyone agreed was like, okay, he was good this past year. Now, so cutting him, especially this late in the like process, is odd, right? And like you're not saving that much. Now, superficially, or not even superficially, but if you try to create a rationale for it, like, yeah, he's 36 or going to be 36. He played less snaps this past year than he did the previous year. And he does free up, I guess, $3.5 million, but
3.67.
$3.67 million. So like if you have to pinch pennies with the cap because maybe you had another move lined up, like John Schneider has said, they are still talking to people. Bob Condotta reported, I think, as well as other people, that they would still like to bring Shelby back. So like you can see, like, okay, maybe that makes sense, but on a line that is desperate for players that can do something, he was definitely one of those guys that we can all agree. So moving on for him is a little brash, especially when you consider that their other nose tackle, Brian Monet, is not going to be able to play next year. So like if they, and also in free agency, there are very few pure nose tackles left. There aren't any. Almost all of them are gone. So it's not like they can make their kind of signature, vet min deal for a guy that is a solid player like Al Woods was originally, right? When they brought him in, I think was it 2019 or 2020, whatever that year that
19.
was originally. So it's odd, and you can't go into the draft needing to draft 2 nose tackles because they already needed to draft one. What they needed to replace, basically, they needed to replace Monet with Al Woods and then replace Al Woods with the draft pick. And now they need to draft 2 guys to replace both of them. And rookie nose tackles, first of all, they're rare to begin with, but their track record among other defensive tackle types as a rookie is usually pretty bad. Like Jordan Davis is one of the best nose tackle prospects ever, and he was just average last year. And he was a top 15 pick or whatever he was. So like Brian Monet played really good ball his second and third year, but he was bad his first year. And granted, he was an undrafted free agent, but he was bad. And it's like those body types, it's difficult for them. Yeah, it's difficult for them to adapt to the NFL. So I really hope they can find a guy that, even if they don't view as like a huge, Al Woods like zero technique, maybe a guy that they think of that would fit the mold as a good rotational like one technique that they play at zero and just don't have them like true 2 gap, kind of play like the BS lag technique. And just make it work, because they need someone to eat up snaps in addition to whoever they draft. I can't see them drafting 2 guys. It's too much. And then the other thing that is weird about this move is, yeah, every year there's turnover. You have to live with it. But they have 6 guys have left. It's so hard to replace 6 rotational players. Now, obviously, 3 of them aren't going to play that many snaps, right? But your frontline guys need to be able to make a difference. And it's like, well, they could just find guys that are as good. Well, so far, obviously they brought in Jeremiah Jones, huge move. We've talked about him, good move. But then the other guy that they brought in, Jaren Reed, he's worse than the guys he's replacing. So the first move they've made of the guys that aren't meant to be stars, they're just meant to be solid rotational guys. The first move they've made is already a downgrade. Again, there's cap considerations. Poona Ford's probably looking at closer to 10 million than he is 5 million. So I understand that you probably couldn't pay that. You weren't going to pay Shelby Harris's cap hit. But, and again, they can still bring him back, but like straight up, like, well, they can just replace him. Yeah, but one of the replacements so far is already a downgrade, no matter what they do schematically. So I don't know. It's very puzzling. I'm sure they've got moves lined up still. It's not over yet. And the draft was always going to be the main course here, but I just don't like where they are at this moment, at this part of the process. So
yeah, a lot to unpack there, but I think they're all sort of valid reasons, valid concerns for, let's not panic, because this stage in the process, you're right in that the defensive tackle, nose tackle options are drying up in free agency. It's interesting that Bob Condotta of the Seattle Times reported that he hasn't heard that the Seahawks would have Al Woods back. Now maybe they would, just for the right price, like $3.67 million in cap space isn't to be sniffed at. He was on a 2-year, $9 million deal, wasn't he, after his impressive work? And if you remember last year, he only started 14 games and missed some time with a sore Achilles. So maybe it is just that they're worried that the body is starting to break down and that he is 36 years old. But like, if you look at the other options instead of Woods, Ashawn Robinson's like the only guy, right? And
well, he's not even a nose. Like it would be,
and he's not a pure nose. Yeah, he's like more of a big 4-eye, right?
He's a 3-tech. He's a 4-eye. He's a power stepping 3-tech and a mirror stepping 4-eye, and he's good at it. But I just don't think, like, to me, he's no different than Ford or Shelby as a run defender. And like, he probably could play nose. Like, it's not like, totally foreign. It's just not the ideal player. But like, the only other guy that is a more head up over the center, and even this guy isn't that great at taking on doubles, is DeAndre Senat for the Bucks. He was Vita Vea's backup, and he's a solid player. If you bring him in and draft a guy that you like at nose tackle, like Keanu Benton, for example, in the second round, then you're just fine. And I'm not fretting. It's just Al Woods was the one assurance you had, like the one anchor that you can roster around, and it just makes it puzzling. Clearly, they have confidence that they're going to.
So maybe there's a release which will happen. There'll be a cap casualty, but again, those tackles aren't really the types to be cap casualties. Like there isn't the kind of money to justify that happening at that point in the season, in the off season. So it's strange in that sense too. And then you do wonder, like with what you've said, like being correct about it taking a while for these guys to acclimatize from college to the NFL. I wonder, like, one, are the Seahawks sort of overly inspired by the success they had with playing two rookie tackles, offensive tackles in Abraham Lucas and Charles Cross? So they just like, well, damn, we'll just get really young and we'll just let it fly and see what happens. I would hope not, given this a slightly different scenario, because schematically it's a lot harder to compensate and help out a rookie defensive tackle than it is a rookie offensive tackle.
Yeah.
But two, if you look at the way college football is going, well, college football has gone. Finding guys who play in that kind of 3-4 bare front system and are asked to play head up nose tackle and mirror step, or even play in the 4-eye and mirror step, that is easy. And that, like, so much of college football is that, like, more than the NFL. And I think the trickle up effect is that you're getting more and more of these kind of tweener types who have played in the kind of, 3-4 end in terms of like basic roster terms, the 3-4 end kind of role. And you do get these big kind of nose tackles, but you also, more than size, you get kind of quickness there and guys who are lagging, which is knocking back the center and then falling back into the backside A gap, depending on the blocking scheme. So maybe they feel bold about how college football is developing, and also the fact that there are some intriguing nose tackle options in this class. Salaki Ika, that's his name, right? From Baylor, another name. He didn't test very well, but then he is nose tackle. So there is that to unpack. But just like the sheer amount of snaps that they've lost from their interior, the defensive line, it does raise a worry.
Staggering.
Another guy we didn't mention, and maybe he could return just before we get to the snap count, is Poona Ford. So Poona Ford is a really interesting case of, it kind of hints at the next subject we'll get to, but also it's a really interesting case of a guy who, in the review, after watching him play 3 technique and 2-eye, predominantly in fronts where he was asked to play heavy on a guard and 1.5 gap, mirror step, and struggled massively in those 2-4-5 looks. Really struggled with what he's been asked to do. Just wasn't his game. It robbed him of all of his strengths, which are, his quickness, low ability to get lower than the pad level of his opponent and shoot into the backfield, penetrate. It just completely destroyed his game. After all of watching that and us thinking, well, that was a bit weird. He's best where he's playing 5 tech and nose tackle. And indeed, during the season, his best stuff came in the brief flashes where they played under and he'd play as a 1 tech as a shade over the center, and he'd just be quicker and he'd look really spicy doing that. And it's like, well, maybe we should do this a bit more often. But anyway, after all of that, then you hear Pete Carroll say in his radio show at some point during the end of the season stuff, oh, yeah, we like him more over the nose. And then John Schneider at the Combine says he's more of a nose. So it's like, what on earth was happening? Well, maybe he lands back in Seattle because he could play. His best football in Seattle came in 2020, I'd say, and 2021 maybe, where he played head up on the center. But because it was a bare front, he was still one-on-one with that center, and he was able to almost, because they're technically not two gapping that guy, they're bashing up the center and then lagging into the backside A gap. He actually had some really impressive reps where he'd run through into that backside A gap, into the backfield, and make tackles for loss, hunt down plays sideline to sideline, kind of clean stuff up for Seattle, especially on the backside of wide zone runs. And so maybe he's the guy who they're thinking about. Like, it seemed like in 2022, along with his weird usage, I think maybe he slimmed up slightly to be rush the passer, try and earn a bigger payday, which hasn't transpired as of yet, and add some pressure. But yeah, I don't know. So moving to the point about the snaps, if Poona Ford doesn't return, and obviously they've lost Shelby Harris for now, maybe he seems the likeliest to return based on reports, and then Al Woods is gone. Griff, they've lost what is it, like 900 snaps more?
A lot more than that.
A lot more.
I mean, and the way it adds up, of all the losses added up, it's like 2,000.
Oh, great. Brilliant.
I mean, if you include Collier, which, you replace him with.
Oh, yeah. So that's the news as well. LJ Collier, I don't think Seattle had much interest in re-signing Collier, but he signed with the Arizona Cardinals. And hilariously, his agent cited the Cardinals scheme as a reason for signing there. And bearing in mind as well that Jonathan Gannon, the Cardinals coach, when he was with the Eagles, he was running whatever you want to call it, but a Fangio tree, just like Seattle. But what did the Eagles do? They ran a lot of bare fronts and power stepping fronts. And by the way, Collier struggled in those too, but not as much 2-4-5 from the Eagles. It was more like a passing down situation deal for them. Yeah, he said, and when they did it as well, there was actually some more movements from the 2-4-5. It wasn't as static.
The results in it were horrible though too, which is an important lesson to take from that.
Yeah,
and consider all that talent. It's hard to defend the run in that front.
Yeah, and Collier's agent said that basically they play upfield, and look at what they did last year in Philadelphia. Which
for Collier's sake, though, I think he needs to be an edge, just a big edge.
Yeah,
like the whole big. Yeah. He needs to be a 5 tech that can rush outside, and because he likes to use space to set up. If he ever had a chance in the NFL, really, he never should have been tried to have been used as an in and out guy. He wasn't ever going to be Michael Bennett.
Like, even his impressive college 3 tech reps were very wide 3 tech, where he could then build up from that wide angle on the guard.
Yeah,
but yeah. Anyway, so they've lost over 2,000 snaps, and that's weird because it's saying that the front office, their lesson is, okay, we had some real difficulties defending the run last year. We were serious about getting it right up front. We want to, Pete Carroll spoke about needing to change the mode, be more dynamic up front. John Schneider kind of agreed with that at the combine. But it says the front office's lesson is just get rid of everyone, which on the interior of the defensive line, it's all well and good saying that, but it seems very heavy-handed given what we think is most of the reasons that they struggled were these were guys who were being put in a defense which is very difficult, and it's not just Seattle's coaching staff who struggled to coach it. The league worked out how to run on the 2-4-5, like
or 4-2-5, which is effectively the same thing.
Yeah,
at least in alignment. The body types might be different,
and it does matter that the 2-4-5 is basically wide 9 every time.
Right. So just to put it in perspective, only 4 teams in the NFL held opposing offenses below 4 yards per carry in this front on early downs. Now, EPA is a better measure, but it's just yards per carry is an easier, it's easier to conceptualize. Only 4 teams. So just to put in perspective how inherently difficult it is, there are so many things working against you in it, especially on 1st and 10 against under center, even if it's 11 personnel. So it is not easy. The when you talk about scheme fits, the players that you need to make that front work the way they used it, as much as they used it, hardly exist. And if you want to go get them, you have to overinvest in run defense. Then you've already lost if you have to overinvest just to make your run defense, not even good, but average and something like that, you fall ass backwards into personnel that can do that. You don't go hunt for them.
Right.
If you have it, great, but you don't go. It's just not what you do.
And so, are they buying into the fact that it wasn't scheme? Like, is the front office sort of overlooking that to the point that it's damaging? Because these players who have been released now, okay, Woods was getting older, but say a Shelby Harris or a Poona Ford is the best example of this. They looked very good when Seattle was running bare fronts. They were good. Griff, you can speak to this, but they were good this year when Seattle did it. But in 2021, for instance, that's when Poona Ford, as we've said, his best football came. And Outwood too.
Well, I mean, and Poona was playing 3-4 end in 2021. And their numbers were, and I still prefer him at nose in the bear. But like, it's just like in the 5-man front, really. Poona can play anywhere on the interior on a 5-man front, whether it's under or over bear, just because there are more one-on-ones, and he can play over the tackle, over the guard, over the center. He is perhaps most exciting over the center, because if you can single him up, he's just too quick. And he's too quick for guards to reach too if he's padding back, right? Playing the lag technique, that's what made him so particularly special. But yeah, I mean, just when people when the conversation is, well, they didn't fit their new 3-4 for, I mean, 3-4 isn't new. They did less 3-4 this year than they did last year, and just isolating their performance in the 3-4 and this nickel complement, the 3-3-5, their numbers are identical as they were to 2021 by yards per carry rank and EPA rank and success rate. They're top 10 in all three. So it's like,
that's crazy.
3 years in a row. So it's just the conversation really comes down to overusage of their nickel even front and then performance therein. And sure, would that front be better with 2 Al Woods? Absolutely. But then also you're starting to undo the whole point of it, which is try to have a 4-man rush. Al Woods isn't going to get you, 2 Al Woods aren't going to get you pressure in the over G front or the 2I front. It's just not going to happen. They might allow your edges, if your edges are awesome, to get upfield more because they can handle more in the run. But then Al Woods types can only play so many snaps. So then you need 3 of them. So then you're getting into the whole arena of having to overinvest to make it work. So the way they use the front, it's just not tenable. And like the other thing is, well, if the idea is, the scheme wasn't the problem, the players are the problem, so get rid of the players. Okay, we're going to insert in Draymond Jones. If Draymond Jones is playing 3 technique, it's going to be just as bad in that if they keep the scheme identical. He's 285. He can't hold on double teams on a 2-high shell in a static look, pre to post snap with a 4-man front. So it's just, he can't. It's not his fault. It's
watching the Denver film was just crazy to me because it was very similar to what happened with Seattle, the same kind of problems.
It was worse than I thought it was going in. I mean, because Evero still had ideas.
Yeah, at least Evero tried to, he like blitzed into a bear look from the 2-4-5 to try and help out against gap stuff, whereas Seattle had less than that for gap answers.
And you have the occasional like interior twist, like a Tom stun or something,
right, which is kind of a similar idea to, sorry, I cut you off when you were saying what it was against, but similar to how the 49ers in their 45, they kind of mix up exit stunts for the run from the tackle and the end for like a similar reason. For what run were you saying it was against, Griff?
I was just saying like zone even,
right?
But just to mess with like their reach rules and
blocking
everything.
schemes,
yeah, and it's and all those DCs, they throw so much action on it because they know they don't have the personnel to just stand up to 5-6 blockers on the line of scrimmage with 4 guys on the line. Even if you're gapped out and you roll the safety down, it's really hard. So it's just not players.
So what have we said there though? Just to recap, what we've said is not only have they lost over 2,000 snaps, but they've lost over 2,000 snaps of players who, when they were in the right positions and not put in a bind, were pretty good.
Performed well.
They were we've seen it. Like, this is why it's particularly wild. We've seen them play well. Now, this may look really rash. Again, there's the caveat that there's a long off season. There's news that DeForest Buckner wants to play for a contender and could be traded per NFL rumors. But
I don't know
that's
about
always
that
been
account,
a murmuring.
but I choose to believe it.
Great account, yeah. But yeah, I choose to believe it when the rumor is exciting enough.
Exactly.
So, maybe Seattle makes another massive move like that. But right now, it's kind of puzzling. And then you add in what they've replaced these guys with, which we don't want to make this the Bash Jaren Reed podcast, but they signed Jaren Reed in free agency. And we talked about that briefly, but we've both had a chance to watch more of him. And also the contract figures have come out. So it's a fairly cheap contract. It's not like what it was first reported as is often the case. He earns $5,150,000 contract. But he only has $1.2 million guaranteed this season, and next year he has no guaranteed salary. So it's basically a 1 year.
So 1 year deal, yeah.
1 year, $3 million deal with $1.2 million guaranteed. So fine. But Jaren Reed, like culturally, very important, as we spoke about. Clearly, like a big locker room presence. Someone who's an established veteran in the league. He's 31 years old now. It'll be his 8th season, I believe. He obviously started in Seattle, so he kind of gets what's going on there. He's typically kind of a selfless player, good at setting up pass rush stuff. He always used to play the run with hard effort. But now he cannot play the run. Like his run defense technique is collapsed. And we were talking in the DMs. I sort of, there's a light bulb moment for me with how you were phrasing it, because every snap I've seen of him against the run in Green Bay, he looks like he's late off the football. Like he just looks much slower than the guy in front of him who he's trying to knock back. And it's like, why does this keep happening? Like, is he keying the wrong thing? Is he just tired today? And Griff, you think maybe he's lost his first step quickness, which I think that probably is the explanation. Like, he can't get the right foot in the ground. And then if you think how all the power is delivered as you come out your stance, you put that foot in the ground and your hips are coming through and your hands are shooting out to knock back the guy.
Yeah. I mean, I think it starts there. Like a lot of guys, as they get older, everyone loses their first step quickness, but some of them, depending on their style, have the mass to overcome it, or just the pure strength to overcome it. And Reed is not the biggest guy ever for a guy that is historically viewed as mostly a run defender, right? And I think the play strength is at his best was maybe mildly above average.
Yeah.
So I don't know if he just has enough to overcome it, but he can't get into blocks. Like, you can't put no force is going to come out of your hands when you engage a block if your feet aren't in the ground. And so essentially centers are just getting leverage on him and uprooting him. So I also, on top of that, though, this is kind of the silver lining. On top of that, a lot of his technique, like the stuff that he can control, is just really lousy. And I think, the pitch is, the Seahawks think, well, one, he's playing way too many snaps, so we'll cut his snaps by literally 50%. He'll be a 300 to 400 snap player, not a 700, 800 snap player. And then it's, he was trying to get upfield a lot to be a pass rusher, maybe not keying the run as disciplined as he should be. So we can fix that. And then Clint Hurt thinks, I can hone his technique back in. I can motivate him. We know each other.
Yeah, so Hurt used to use Reed's technique as like coaching tape. Like, he was very much a fan of that. And I know he was kind of hot and cold in Green Bay. And Schneider mentioned on one of his recent radio shows that Reed was speaking bad about Green Bay, and Schneider sort of jokingly had to be like, "Hey, Green Bay's not too bad." Obviously, with
so maybe there. Reed was just checked out over there, right?
Right.
And hopefully but it's just the information that is available to us superficially, just what's on on the screen watching him. It's not pretty. You can't even say inconsistent. It's just bad.
Yeah, and like, really, was it done more for the fact that he had some pass rush production last year? Like, what was it, 33 pressures per PFF last year, and he had a good pass rush
ESPN
win
thought
rate.
he had an incredibly high pass rush win rate. I don't
Right,
know, but there's something there. But he's not making a difference in Seattle in that department, I don't think.
and then I wonder if that's what the team looks at, because then you see that today Mario Edwards Jr., who's a guy we like every offseason we'd speak about as, oh, Seattle could look at Mario Edwards Jr. because he always does well in the pressure numbers from that kind of 3-4 end spot, with Seattle running these bear looks from 2020 onwards as their base until 2022. And so now is Mario Edwards Jr., a 3-4 end, who's now 29 years old. Is that another pickup? He just visited the team, but
It's I mean, so like Draymond Jones is essentially, he and Quentin Jefferson are the same body type, so he's replacing that kind of body type. Edwards would feature more, but he'd be replacing Collier's body type. So with those two body types theoretically on the roster, even though Edwards hasn't been signed, say he is, that would imply that they need Reed to be beef. They need him to be your early down run defender grunt, because if he isn't, if they're also thinking of him as like, hey, this guy might actually be one of our interior pass rushers that we rotate in and out, then who are they going to have on early downs to defend the run? You need somebody in there. So I feel like the theory behind him with just the report of Edwards coming in. Now, Edwards can play the run, don't get me wrong. But, in a perfect world, you don't want both your 3-4 ends being 280 something. You want one of them being 280 something and the other guy being bigger. So, but like the whole idea behind this is, yeah, get younger. Absolutely. But you can get younger and not gut everybody. Like, it's like, those don't have to be in conflict with one another. You can have Al Woods on the team and still get way younger and set yourself up for the future. And like on a case by case basis, Ford not being brought back, at least to this point, makes sense. You can fashion an argument for it. Shelby Harris being cut makes sense. He had a $12 million cap hit. You're not going to pay that. As solid as I think he is, you're not going to pay that. Al Woods, age, injury, etc. Okay, there's an argument, I guess. You obviously let LJ Collier walk out the door, unfortunately for him. Well, he got his deal, so good for him. Quentin Jefferson, I guess, he kind of lived up to, he got generated a lot of pressure, but he's a guy where I think you can say you want more run defense out of that type of player, because then that kind of renders their pass rush moot, because they're just getting gashed when he is on the field. But again, like in Bear, he was fine. He wasn't good, but he was fine. Probably better than Jaren Reed was last year in Bear, for example. But I understand wanting to move. Oops, I understand. Pardon me. I understand moving on from him, especially when Draymond Jones is effectively the de facto Quentin Jefferson replacement and upgrade. But like, it's not any one of the moves. It's all of them together at the same time. Is just a tremendous amount of turnover, because every offseason they go and find Alan Branch, Tony McDaniel, Ataba Rubin, Tom Johnson, who worked for a few weeks, but they cut him for cap reasons. Al Woods, they go find Al Woods, right? But they find those guys when they only needed to replace 500 snaps or so, and then they draft another 500 snaps in the draft, right? This is a tremendous amount of turnover. And again, they can bring a guy in. Hopefully they bring Shelby back. I don't like the cupboards being completely bare at nose tackle. Hopefully they can manipulate the cap where Puna Ford can be your nose tackle, and then you go draft another one, and then you're set. It's just everything's up in the air right now. I would feel a lot better about the Al Woods cut if they had already made the other moves they were going to make, just so that you know where the picture is. Like, a lot of it's the uncertainty. and they probably don't make this move this late in the process if they didn't feel fairly confident about the other moves they have coming. But man, I hope they don't walk into the draft needing 2 nose tackles. That's just not easy.
Yeah, and I feel like there's been a year where they haven't had the obvious nose tackle on the roster before heading into the draft. But generally speak, and I need to kind of
that's probably what led to the Jaren Reed pick, even though he was a 1 technique nose, not a 0 technique nose at the time. It was because I think that was 2015 Meebane. That was Meebane's last year, and they didn't have one.
There you go.
So they go and spend a 2nd round pick on a 2-down run defender.
But generally speaking, as we generally speaking, as we speak about, as we've mentioned, and as we'll keep talking about, we're given the draft. Like John Schneider doesn't like to enter drafts with an obvious hole on the roster, and nose tackle is a gaping hole, and you worry if it's lower. There's just the worries that creep in. If it's lower down on their list of priorities, are they planning on running more 2-4-5 again? Because that seems to be, and now that doesn't match what Pete Carroll's comments have been regarding the changes that needs to happen in the scheme and the approach to the defense. But there is, some room for concern. And yeah, looking at the available names now, Michael Brockers, he was kind of done in Detroit.
He's done.
Linval Joseph, he's 34. Like
he's a solid player, but the question is, why would we have any expectation that he would come in and improve the run defense?
Yeah.
Considering the Eagles' run defense overall was poor last year, why are we supposed to make the assumption that he improves? I mean, he probably keeps Bear equally good, and then he probably keeps the 2-4-5 equally bad, because there's not a whole lot he can do unless he's peak Damon Harrison. There's nobody on the market that can find to improve the scheme as they applied it last year. They don't exist.
And then the other guy is Akeem Hicks, who's not a nose tackle, but it's kind of an obvious link to draw in, and he's big to play nose, but he's turns 34 in November, but obviously he's been in a Fangio kind of system with the Bears, and is very long and very tall and very big. So maybe that happens.
He can give you, 350 snaps, maybe a little more, and that would kind of raise your floor here, because I think the principle is, like, good defensive lines need, like, every defensive line has a floor and a ceiling, and I think that I think we're underappreciating how high their floor has been, because the ceiling has been so low. It hasn't, like, that's where I agree. There isn't the blue chip player, there isn't the fringe Pro Bowler even on the defensive line. But what there is their bottom rung players have all been a lot better than most teams' bottom rung players, and that matters. And now in efforts to improve the ceiling, I'm afraid the floor is going to bottom out. Like Jaren Reed replacing Poona Ford's snaps, the run defense could plummet even further. Even the good run defense in Bear could plummet if they don't get another guy. Now, Draymond Jones keeps it the same. Like, as a run defender, he's equal to Shelby in Bear. As a pass rusher, he's much better, obviously. That's what makes him, because he's a 3-down player who can rush the passer all 3 downs. And, like, what makes Quentin Jefferson, even though he's not as good of a pass rusher as Draymond, what makes him not as valuable as he could be is because you don't get the benefits of Quentin Jefferson's pass rush on 1st and 10, because you don't play him on 1st and 10 because of the run defense. So that's this is where they're struggling, because they don't have the floor players. And again, they can sign a guy, maybe sign 2 guys. Hopefully they can sign an external guy and then bring back one of the guys they cut, and then go ham in the draft. Go draft your ceiling raisers, which is what they need. But yeah, there's just 2 angles from this, and I think they're succeeding at one angle and then so far failing at the other.
And the other factor to this as well is this is a front 7, and Cody Barton, he obviously jump to the chance to be an actual middle linebacker in a 4-3 system, have the green dot, and go to Washington and play behind a 4-3 over system and play behind a very talented defensive line that they have in Washington. So maybe Seattle, and Schneider described how a lot of the linebackers signed early when they were given the kind of right number for them, rather than trying to wait it out and get more money. And maybe Seattle was kind of surprised slightly by how Barton left for, what was it, 3.5 million. But if you look at like Devin Bush, but again, suggesting that they're surprised by that and everything. But Devin Bush's contract now, he's unlikely, given his recent form and the fact that, you know, the way that there's some incentives, and he has a $1.74 million salary guaranteed. But his cap number this year is $3.5 million. So Devin Bush or Cody Barton, it's not even a contest. And again, it's like, it's almost I get maybe culturally something had to change, and they really wanted to emphasize that, you know, it's not acceptable what happened. We need to hold people accountable. But honestly, it feels more like change for change's sake. Like, and I don't really think they've got better. I think right now they've definitely not got better. Now
it's
maybe they pull a rabbit out of a hat, but it's hard to see how, you know, John Schneider said last week on his radio show they were talking to a number of defensive linemen. Well, the number of defensive linemen is less now, and
he said that before Greg Gaines signed with Tampa Bay to replace Sinnat, and Gaines is a nose tackle. So like there's one less nose tackle. So now Seattle might get the guy that the Bucs just replaced, and like that's what they're looking at. Again, Sinnat is solid, but like he was, you know, the Bucs prioritized another guy over him. Right.
Thing with Sinnat as well is like he's a short-armed guy, right? Under 32-inch arms, which again, like he's played football in the NFL now and was like solid. But Seattle, ideally, schematically, but also prototype-wise, they wouldn't like that. Gaines is another example of a short-armed guy. So,
true.
I don't know. It will be very interesting.
I don't. And Al Woods, I mean, he still wants to play. So it's just, it's bizarre. It's not like he was mulling retirement, at least based off of what he said at the end of the year, and what and like how Quandre Diggs responded. Like he tweeted immediately like a crazy business or something like that. I mean, it's as like the MO is, get younger, youth movement, great. But we're talking about a good player. Like you just let a good player walk out the door right now. So like that in and of itself, that's usually a rule of thumb, is you don't let good players go that aren't straining your cap. I don't care that they're 36. Like the 350 snaps he was going to play next year are important, because you need 2 nose tackles to run the scheme.
Maybe we do look silly when Al Woods resigns for less, and it's like they've shaved off, you know,
I feel way better
on their cap number. I mean, that could be what happens, but right now it feels slightly odd. Now, the other thing we mentioned, Brian Mone is dealing with an ACL injury, right? And as a almost 350-pound guy, although he's probably a bit lighter now, but that's going to be a heavy, like Pete Carroll said, how that will be a long process, but that is going to be a really long process. Like, I'm not sure. I mean, hopefully he'll you know, make a full recovery and he proves people wrong. But like, I don't know how much he's factoring into their plans this year, and maybe they explore the possibility of just releasing him for cap savings. But like that down the line, but that's a long road to recovery for him, and so you can't really expect much from him either. That's sort of why we're saying Seattle needs the 2 nose tackles.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Monet is in the picture at all for 2023, just because he, like you said, he's a big man. Those recoveries are brutal the bigger you are, and then on top of it, that happened late in the season, so he's probably looking at a 12-month minimum timetable. So he probably, even if he got healthy, he wouldn't be able to go until late December, early January. So he's just not part of the picture, I don't think, for next year, which is really unfortunate for him because, this might derail his career. You never know how people come back from ACLs, even though technology is getting better and surgeries are getting better. So I don't know. It's all odd. I think the ideal way forward out of this, I think, is can they manipulate the cap to bring Ford back and have him be your nose tackle so that you can have one of the two nose tackle spots filled and just bring back a player that we know is good. Talk about the floor, right? So he elevates your floor right away. It takes pressure off Reed. Reed can just kind of be it. You're just rooting for Reed to be average at that point. Let Reed fit around Puna and Draymond and the guys that you draft. Also, like, you want to go into the draft with having a nose tackle on the roster already that you like, just to give you options, so that you're not forced to focus nose tackle when there might be a better player at 3 technique, right? It just depends. Like you said, John Schneider doesn't like to have a bunch of holes going to the draft. At least have a roster mirror so that you have the flexibility. So this is just funneling them toward one way. And then also, even though you have Draymond, there is still room for another 3 technique. Again, there are 3 guys on the interior to really go crazy. And then you think about it, when it is 2nd and 12 or 3rd and 6, then you can have Draymond and that 3 technique together. That nose tackle isn't going to be on the field. So to draft a nose tackle high just because you have to now would be, if it comes at the potential expense of being able to focus your resources toward 3 technique, would be pretty disappointing, I think. So, but again, all this could sound really silly if in the next 72 hours or even 2 weeks from now they go signing, like, oh, okay, he's actually pretty good, and then they're fine,
Absolutely.
It just depends. Or they could trade for DeForest Buckner, and at that point, I don't care. Draft 5 nose tackles, and you're set at 3 technique. I wouldn't be complaining.
And the thing, just wrapping up on Puna Ford, he could probably land in what he perceives as a better opportunity for himself elsewhere, and he could also probably get more money elsewhere, even though he's waited it out a bit. So I'm not
the
sure.
Bills supposedly have interest in him. Sorry to cut you off.
The who? Sorry.
The Bills supposedly have interest in him.
And the Eagles were rumored. So, and maybe he feels his time in Seattle's over. Like, they haven't exactly shown him much love in this stage of it, as far as we know. So there you go. Right. Are we overreacting? Let us know in the comments. Now, we did have a very kind donation when we were being late from Hooch Sniper. They ask, is there any scenario where Tyree Wilson can fit the 3-4? This is Texas Tech's Tyree Wilson in the 2023 NFL Draft. We actually covered this in our podcast on the 5th overall pick and the kind of fits of Jalen Carter. That with a big caveat of it was before a lot of the Carter stuff had come out. And then Will Anderson and then Tyree Wilson. And we basically summarize yes and no. So there's definitely a scenario like Tyree Wilson's best lined up wide is a wide rusher. The thing is, he is awkward dropping back into coverage. Like, he's a tall guy. His body composition is not that of an outside linebacker who can drop into pass coverage. Even though there are reps of him doing it on tape, it looks awkward, and he is a bit awkward doing it. And you wouldn't really want him doing it that often. So it's a bit like, if you remember when Carlos Dunlap used to have to drop into coverage in 2021, where Seattle, data-wise, actually performed quite well when that happened. But in terms of the awkwardness and the viability and the frequency that you want to do that, is not the best. And so...
Oh, let me interject. And why was Carlos Dunlap dropping into coverage in 2021, Matty?
Because Seattle was running a 3-4.
Yeah. And then also, it's interesting that they actually ran more 3-4 in 2021 than in 2022, despite...
It's bloody fascinating. It really is. Anyway, so Tyree Wilson would basically be going a bit more back to 2021, where you lose versatility. Like the reason why Seattle went in 2022 to a 3-4 personnel as well as running 3-4 concepts is because then you have two outside linebacker types who can play left and right. So it's like having two 250-pound guys who can drop or rush, than having one kind of 250-pound guy and then one 275-pound guy. So teams knew, and I've said this before, but teams knew what side was dropping, what side was rushing. For instance, 2020, Seattle had KJ Wright as one of their edge guys in the bear look, and then they had Carlos Dunlap. Well, I managed to work out from the UK, whenever Carlos Dunlap was to the field, it was cover 3. Whenever Carlos Dunlap was to the boundary, it was cover 2. So if I work that out, any NFL coach would understand that too. So it became a tell. So the whole point is versatility, adaptability, more options in your coverage stuff.
So go ahead.
But finally, Wilson, in the 2-4-5, that would be good in a way. Like it feels better because, again, in the 2-4-5 nickel front, which Seattle ended up running a lot more than we anticipated last year, maybe they'll do that more this year too. But Wilson has length and he's used to playing wide still. And in the 2-4-5, it's still 2 wide 9 guys. And so maybe he'd add a bit more run defense than that kind of 250-pound body type. Say like how Darrell Taylor struggled to set the edge. I think Wilson would be more, he has more tools to be able to do that, more traits to be able to accomplish that. Now, run defense is a lot of that is also effort and technique, but his length and size would give Seattle a slightly different weapon out there to stop the run and be sound setting the edge against the run. So thank you for the donation, Hooch Sniper. You're muted, Griff.
Yeah, thanks, Hooch. And I think the last... Oh.
No, you're not.
I'm muted? Can you hear me?
No, it just lagged.
Okay.
My bad.
All right.
Yeah, shut up.
I think the final consideration to make with Tyree is, for all the things that you said, like the schematic accommodations you have to make him work, like becoming less flexible, is he just simply a good enough pass rusher to merit doing all those things? And I don't know if he is. I think he could be, but it really depends on how they feel about their eval of him. I don't think you take him under the idea of, well, he was the best available, so now we need to fix our scheme. You take him as like, we think this guy's going to be a freak, and yeah, we'll tweak our scheme a little bit to make him fit in a 3-4. And then also, yeah, he could make the 2-4 a little more stout when it comes to that. But I think, yeah, that's the question mark, is essentially how good of a pass rusher is he really going to be? And then from there, you make the decision. If he's a top 10 edge rusher, like bona fide, then okay, do it. But if he's more like a 6 to 8 sack guy with mildly above average pressure rates, then is it really worth it to go through all that? But then the other thing is, there are other players similar to him, not in style, but in how you would use them, that could be available in the second round, where a second rounder, you're not going to bend your scheme around, but there may only, and because of that, there may only be 500 snaps available to them, but getting 500 snaps out of a second rounder is fine if that second rounder is really effective in those 500 snaps. So, it's all opportunity cost, really.
Yeah, there you go. Bona fide is a great phrase, isn't it? Good old Latin.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and talking of the draft, on Friday we're actually going to have our outside linebacker preview, excluding Will Anderson because we've already done him. But names like Will McDonald IV, BJ Ojulari, Felix Anyuduke Uzoma. Other names: Miles Murphy,
Nolan Smith, Will McDonald,
Robert Beal Jr.
Jr.
Is it a good class? Is it a bad class? You'll have to find out on Friday.
It's a very bad class.
You have to find out on Friday. But anyway, until that point, thank you everyone for joining. Good audience. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment, share it with a family member or a friend or an enemy. Talk about it at the water cooler. if that's a thing. I've never worked in an office before. Actually, that's not true. But anyway.
You'd like water coolers. They're not bad.
Yeah. Are you pro water cooler?
Yeah, I mean, most people bring their water bottles now, but I feel like it encourages, some sort of camaraderie among a workforce. It's where labor can organize.
Very important to have a togetherness. Anyway, follow Griffin at C Mike Spin Move.
Matty, you definitely took the high road on that. You could have. You were interested in sowing class consciousness there, were you? Said no, thank you.
I'm just, so we have an expression.
You're trying to make sure we don't get demonetized, is what you're saying.
No, so in cricket, right? You're familiar with cricket?
Uh-huh.
You can play a defensive shot, and you do that by playing a straight bat. So we have an expression: if you can play things with a straight bat.
Sure.
Yeah.
You play it with a straight. Interesting. Now, where do U-turns come in cricket?
Well, where
do they come into this analogy? Because I feel like you've made a good U-turn here.
No, the bowler sort of when they're pacing out their run up, they kind of do a U-turn around the top and then come back around.
Cricket's a great sport. I'm learning more about it.
Yeah, it's like baseball, but much better and not like rounders.
It does seem like it's like what if you played baseball under the influence of many things and came up with, a better idea, really.
Yeah, like what if you played a better sport? There's a reason that.
No, I still love baseball just because I'm acculturated in it, in the grand scheme.
Yes. Anyway, follow me at Matty F. Brown. Follow the podcast at Seattle Overload. 5-star reviews. Download the show. Thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. And remember, it's Griffin's birthday, maybe tomorrow. So everyone just wish Griffin happy birthday every day.
I didn't say that.
Yeah. Goodbye. And and also, it's a podcast, so search for us on your podcast app. Like, don't just download it off YouTube like a maniac. Like, 5-star review on your podcast app. Thank you.